Ah, kept you waiting, huh, Yoko-chan? The third person was Tetsuo, who loved going on adventures. That's what he himself said. But from my point of view, he honestly seemed kinda lazy. I wonder how he made a living. So, you're in high school now too, huh? Time sure flies. Why, not that long ago you were just like a little monkey. Especially when you were a baby. Whenever Tetsuo laughed, he always did so with his mouth wide open. Whenever I saw his face like that though, it strangely never made me angry, no matter what he said. He was just that kind of guy. On that note, Yoko-chan, do you remember when I took you to the river when you were younger? You had only just started school at the time. I remember. You fell into the water. It was terrible. You couldn't swim, so I immediately jumped in to save you. You were kicking around so much though that I almost drowned too. I managed to save you, but you weren't breathing, so I panicked. Huh? You don't remember? I had to give you mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Mouth to mouth, you know? If I didn't do that, then you'd be in heaven right now. Ah, that sure was something. It really takes me back. But let's get to the story now, Yoko-chan. Do you remember that really hot summer a few years ago? It was right around this time of year. I went mountain stream climbing with 4 of my friends and we took a taxi all the way to Takigatani Dam. Then we walked for about 5 hours up the forest path. Once we got there, the place started to empty out and we were surrounded by nothing but untouched nature. Lots of the trees there were several hundreds of years old, and the area was full of lush greenery. And in this large expanse of nature, we spent 4 days following the stream upriver. It was pretty fun. 2 of my friends were pretty experienced at this, while I was so new to it that I was basically holding them up. We had to walk over stones that rolled everywhere, and when we couldn't walk at all, we had to go into the water and swim. It wasn't like you could just walk upstream wherever you wanted. You really had to think about where to go to keep going up. If you didn't, then you'd exhaust yourself easily and be unable to go any further. It was like a battle of wits against nature. But what about you, Yoko-chan? Do you think that sounds interesting? It does. Ah, we're on the same wavelength, huh? Next time, I'll take you mountain stream climbing with me. Don't worry, it's easier than you think, and I won't take you anywhere dangerous. Sounds good, yeah? Ah, now I'm looking forward to it. Let's go next summer holidays, Yoko-chan. So, continuing with the story. As we enjoyed the nature around us, we slowly climbed. The first day passed, then the second, and then on the third day, it was our final camp. We decided to camp on the riverbed with a layer of rather small stones. The flow of the stream was narrow and calm, and the sound of the flowing water was refreshing for our tired minds and bodies. The area was surrounded by trees, but the reflection of the sun's rays was beautiful. We put our tent up and greeted our final night. It was our last night there, so we sat around the fire with a beer in hand and chatted. And after that, the exhaustion from climbing all that way helped us get a great sleep. We climbed into the tent right away and fell fast asleep. What time is it now? I fell asleep as soon as I went inside, but at some point during the night, I woke up. And then I struggled to fall asleep again, while outside I could hear the soft murmuring of the stream. I thought maybe I could fall asleep while listening to that. And so I focused on it. I could hear voices. There were people's voices mixed in with the sounds of the flowing water. Someone was out there. We were sleeping in 2 different tents, so I thought it was the guys from the other one. I was sharing a tent with Fujisawa. The other 3 guys were in the other, but they had trouble sleeping, so I thought that maybe they went outside. Maybe I should join them, I thought. But if we chatted, then I felt like I'd be even more awake. In that situation, what would you do, Yoko-chan? Go outside. Ah, the same as me. I went outside because I figured I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep again anyway. Outside, a cool breeze blew and the air was chilly, so I was a little cold. It was pretty stuffy inside the tent. Maybe a little too stuffy. I looked around for the others, but I couldn't find them anywhere, and I couldn't hear the voices anymore either. At that moment, a breeze blew past. Nearby trees rustled, and the forest that was sparkling green during the day was now pitch black at night. It was an incredibly creepy feeling. I was creeped out and quickly returned to the tent. I tossed and turned in bed over and over. Even after I climbed back in, I still couldn't sleep, and I could hear the flowing water of the stream outside. Then I heard those voices once more. Yoko-chan, would you go outside again? I would. And I went outside again too, but this time the area was covered in fog. Everything was white. But looking closely, I could see figures through the fog, so I thought I'd join them and walked over. But strangely, they didn't react as I walked over to them. Like, normally, if someone was coming closer, you'd at least notice their footsteps, right? But they didn't notice me at all. It was pretty foggy, so thinking maybe that was why, I called out to them. Hey, what are you doing? But again, they ignored me. So I grabbed one of them by the shoulder, and I spoke to them. I thought my heart was going to jump out of my throat. The moment I reached out for them, they all disappeared. Can you believe it, Yoko-chan? I didn't even look away from them, but they disappeared, like they melted into the fog. At first, I had no idea what had just happened, and so I looked around. They weren't anywhere. Suddenly, I grew scared. I mean, normal people don't just vanish like that, so I started running back to the tent. And then suddenly, Yoko-chan, someone grabbed my shoulder from behind. I was so surprised I thought I might pass out, and then I looked behind me. And then there was a young man standing behind me covered in blood, Yoko-chan. It wasn't somebody I knew, but a complete stranger. And it wasn't just him. A young man and a young woman stood behind him, also covered in blood. A scream tore from my throat. I quickly realized the people standing in front of me were ghosts. I could partially see through them, you see. And these ghosts stared at me as they approached, slowly, ever so slowly, with no expression on their faces. I was scared and tried to run, but I couldn't, and my body refused to move despite my great desire to do so. Did I fall over? Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but it was like my legs weren't my own, and they wouldn't listen to me. The ghosts kept getting closer, and then they stood right in front of me. It was no good. I was done for. And then I passed out, and when I came back to, Fujisawa was holding me. It was still dark and foggy, so it seemed not a lot of time had passed. I sat up and looked around, but I couldn't see the ghosts anywhere. Fujisawa asked me what was wrong. I told him exactly what happened, thinking he wouldn't believe me. But then he said something. "Yoko-chan, what do you think he said?" I saw them too. That's right. He said he saw them too. He looked over at the river when we were drinking earlier. And there, he saw the three of them, standing over the water and looking at us. Because they were standing on the river, there was no doubt they weren't human. I asked him why he didn't say anything earlier. He said he didn't want to scare us, so that was why. At any rate, we decided to go back to the tent. Hearing that, I was suddenly too scared to stay outside. Although, going back to the tent wouldn't solve anything either. Once we got back, I dove right into bed. If I fell asleep right away, it would soon be bright out and I would no longer be scared. So I told Fujisawa to wake me up if anything happened as I climbed in. I prayed nothing would happen as I closed my eyes. A short while later, I woke up to the sound of rain. The weather up until that point had been great, but now it was raining so much that it sounded like a typhoon had blown in. A strange feeling washed over me, kind of like I'd been lifted up into the air. And when I opened my eyes, I was shocked. I was outside the tent. Not only that, but I was floating in the air and looking down at the tent I was sleeping in. Was I having an out-of-body experience? I looked around the tent and was again so shocked I thought my heart might stop. That calm river had now flooded, perhaps due to all the sudden rain. Everyone was in danger, and so I tried to rush back to the tent. But all I could do was look down from above, and I was unable to do anything else. The water continued to rise, and they were going to be washed away, I thought. But I still couldn't do anything. Fujisawa and the others were sleeping in the tents, and if they got washed away, then it would all be over. Did they not realize what was going on? I tried to scream to alert them, but my voice just disappeared in the sound of the rain. What else could I do? Finally, the water entered the tents. Ah! And then the tents washed away. Fujisawa! Next thing I knew, I was inside the tent, drenched in sweat. It was just a dream. I dreamt that the tents got washed away in a flood. I looked next to me and Fujisawa was still asleep. Why did I have a dream like that? It seemed it still wasn't morning, and I dove back under the blanket to try to sleep again. But then, I heard a banging sound, and the tent started shaking. It was like someone was banging on it. What the hell? I jumped up before I could stop myself, and looking at the tent walls, they were moving like they were being hit. It was like dozens of snakes slithering around, and the parts that moved looked like the shape of a hand. It was honestly like a few dozen people were hitting the tent. I didn't know what to do. Why was this happening to me? What did I do? I didn't do anything. I just trembled, and it took everything I had to let out a pathetic cry as I shrank in fear. But it seemed nothing would change unless I did something. So what do you think I did? Ran out of the tent. That's right. I ran out of the tent. I couldn't stay in there another minute longer. And then, there was nobody outside. I thought that maybe one of my friends was trying to wake us up. I didn't want to think that maybe it was the handiwork of those ghosts from before. But it was silent outside, like what I'd just seen hadn't even happened. I was too scared to go back to the tent because I might see the same thing again. If you were me, what would you do, Yoko-chan? Stay outside. I see. You'd do the same, huh? But each time the wind blew, the trees rustled and it sounded like people talking. It's creepy, right? Even though you know you're just imagining it. After what had just happened, I was terrified. But at any rate, Fujisawa was sleeping inside, and that should be reassuring, right? And so I went back inside the tent. I was nervous, but the only thing I could hear was Fujisawa sleeping. I also quickly climbed back into bed and tried to fall asleep. But then, someone started hitting the tent again. Bang, bang. Scared, I tried to wake Fujisawa up. He did say to wake him up if something happened after all. Fujisawa! Fujisawa! I shook him hard, trying to wake him up. But he didn't, no matter how hard I shook him. As I did that, the sounds hitting the tent got more violent. I thought the tent was going to collapse, and unable to stand it any longer, I ran outside. Uah! I screamed as soon as I got outside. I ran back in before I could stop myself. Outside, numerous balls of fire floated in the air. There were so many pale lights that you couldn't even count them all. It was like they were floating in the air, laughing at me. I was terrified, so I took deep breaths to try to calm my rapid breathing. Next thing I knew, the banging on the tent had calmed down, and inside was silent again. Yoko-chan, have you ever seen a ball of fire before? No. You haven't? Well, not many people have, I suppose. Well, that was the first time I'd ever seen something like that too. These balls of fire were around the same size as a baseball, and they burned with a pale light. They were brighter than you'd expect, and the area lit up like it was lunchtime. These balls of fire lit up the inside of the tent, and looking around, it really seemed like the middle of the day. I was creeped out and once again tried to wake Fujisawa up. But then, I sensed someone outside. I looked around and I could see a figure out there. But it wasn't just one. 1, 2, 3. No, maybe even more than that. These figures were hitting the tent as they ran around it. Fujisawa! Fujisawa! Wake up! I desperately tried to wake him, but still he remained asleep. Desperate, I started praying, even though I didn't really know any prayers. I repeated something I'd heard the best I could, over and over. That's how desperate I was. What do you think happened then, Yoko-chan? The spirits got angry. That's right. The spirits got angry. My half-baked prayers had no meaning. No, on the contrary, they had the opposite effect, and the banging on the tent got even more violent. I had no idea what was happening, and honestly, I think my mind went a little crazy. Like, I started hitting the tent from the inside to fight back. Although, maybe it would be better to say that I started acting out violently instead. If you saw yourself like that, you'd probably think you were crazy. That was how violently I acted out. And then, of course, the tent tore, and I ended up beneath it. I was so scared that I just... You get it, right, Yoko-chan? I was curious as to what was happening around me, but I kept my eyes shut tight and couldn't look. Those ghosts were out there, and I had no idea what they were going to do to me. But still, I can't look outside. I desperately crawled out from under the tent, and then... Those ghosts covered in blood were looking down at me. Next thing I knew, the other guys were looking after me. I'd passed out. Pretty pathetic, right? Don't you think so? Hey, Yoko-chan, don't you think? Don't you think? Don't you think? Stop it! Tetsuo-san! Tetsuo suddenly grabbed my neck. Luckily, Kazuko and Yasuaki pulled him off me, so I was okay. But then, Tetsuo passed out. Just like that. Masami did her best to help him. What on earth happened to him? His eyes. They had looked possessed. Tetsuo then groaned and opened his eyes. Are you okay, Tetsuo? Yoko-chan, what did I... It seemed he didn't remember what had just happened. Yasuaki-san filled him in. I see. So that's what I did. I'm sorry, Yoko-chan. Sometimes these things happen. Sometimes when I see people, something happens and when I come back to, I'm in my room or something. Like the other day when I ran into Kazuhiro-san. Tetsuo then fell silent. Come to think of it, isn't Kazuhiro-san a little late? Maybe he's not coming, Yurika said, hearing Kazuhiro's name. Oh yeah, he isn't here yet. Ah, he's late. I'm more worried about Tetsuo-san right now. As expected of Masami, a nurse. She was more worried about the ill person in front of her, rather than someone who wasn't even there. Are you okay, Tetsuo-san? Anyone can see that you're not feeling well. You should lie down for a bit. No, I'm fine. Sorry for worrying you. I just need to sit in silence for a bit. So let's continue. Tetsuo's face was pale. Was he really okay? Everyone looked at me. But at any rate, we should keep going. Next up was